Hello everyone, my name is Joe Hernandez and this presentation is on creating a culture for inclusion through peer play and friendships. I know I am not a teacher nor did I graduate with an education degree, but I will present this in the social work perspective while also tying it with the education field. A fun fact I want to share is that this past spring semester I did an advocacy presentation on increasing the number of social inclusion programs in the Downingtown Area School District. This time, I will be talking more about the fundamentals of inclusion and socialization in a child's environment. The learning objectives in this presentation are as follows. I can define and implement friendships and inclusion. The purpose of childcare for all individuals among those with or without cognitive differences. Notice how I say cognitive differences over the term disabilities, let alone ASD. Both share the same meaning, but using the word disabilities is similar to labeling someone with this impairment. So I will use the word cognitive differences throughout most of this presentation. Also understand attitudes that classmates may have to students with cognitive differences and the flexibility of play techniques and incorporating them outside of play itself. Throughout this presentation, I will be presenting content and videos on promoting peer play and friendships. Also, I will be sharing my experience with the Chester County Intermediate Unit, CCIU for short, where I currently serve as a personal care assistant and work with those with cognitive differences in their home, school, and community settings. Before I start my presentation, I'm going to show a quick video about inclusion. This talks about an individual who has cerebral palsy and the effect and experiences she faces in her daily life.
We explain why the inclusion of people with disabilities is good for everyone. Meet Sarah. She's a smart girl who loves to sing and help her mother to cook. When she grows up, she wants to be a teacher and get married. Sarah has cerebral palsy caused by partial damage to the brain and therefore uses a wheelchair to move around. She's an outgoing person and whenever she needs help, she asks for it. But while Sarah can do most things herself, she faces many barriers. Some people's attitudes as well as physical and economic barriers make life difficult for Sarah. They say she can't be in a choir and so far no school has accepted her. If Sarah can't go to school, she won't find a job, and without a job, she will always be dependent on others. This is not only a waste of her skills, it's a violation of her right to proper education. But what can be done? It's not that hard. Everybody around Sarah can help her to live her life to the fullest and gain back her rights. We need to raise awareness, for example, in education programs. That way, Sarah's community understands the nature of her disability. After setting up a local support group for parents of children with disabilities, Sarah's mother can share her experiences with others. Now, the head teacher of the closest school knows that it's Sarah's right, like any other child, to be educated well. Teachers can get disability-specific training and support from a resource centre when needed. And we need to reduce physical barriers. Building wider doorways and wheelchair ramps benefits the elderly too. When given appropriate materials, people with visual impairments can study anything. With fewer barriers, a proper education and awareness in the community, Sarah has the same chance as others of getting the job she wants. Instead of depending on others, she is appreciated for who she really is, a person of many abilities. Whether someone uses a wheelchair, lives with vision or hearing problems, or has an intellectual or other disability, let's make sure our society includes them. For more information,
First, I want to define friendships. Based on the Mayers and Ostrowski article, friendships are considered a milestone in the early years of a child's development. We have different definitions of this term, but the article states that they provide high-quality pro-social behaviors such as companionship and support. They also talk about mutual friendships where an individual and at least one other person shares a common interest after spending time or playing together. An example includes two children talking about sports, like the NBA Finals that took place a few weeks ago. Friendships influence one's development because it enhances and shapes their social, emotional, and physical well-being, in addition to helping them learn about acceptance, boundaries, relationships, and support. Some of the benefits within friendships is affection, play, which I will talk more about later in this presentation, emotional support on who they can go to in times of distress, such as a family crisis, the enhancement of socialization skills, like maintaining a conversation, and building one's initiation when they talk or play. I also want to highlight what behaviors occur if one lacks friendships, which, as you see, impacts academic performance while increasing the risk of anxiety, depression, social withdrawal, and isolation. Children with cognitive differences are at risk of little to no friendships because they have a difficult time socializing with those who do not share those differences. I can relate to this because not only am I working with school-age clients in their socialization skills, but I have a learning disability, and there were times where I had trouble making friends and was often isolated and bullied when I was in middle school and high school. With the rise of early intervention screenings comes the need in promoting inclusion. Implementing inclusion has become a priority in all educational settings, such as schools and now in daycares. One example is students with ASD being placed in regular educational rooms so they can receive an education and interact with their classmates. At the elementary level, children are introduced about the concept of inclusion when meeting their peers with cognitive differences. Now that we are seeing it incorporated among two groups, children with disabilities and those from other cultures, they have opportunities to interact with their regular education peers. The expected outcome for inclusion among children in these types of settings include developing positive attitudes towards those from different backgrounds, such as race, cognitive capacity, and socioeconomic status, accepting individuals regardless of identification, and understanding how our identity can influence others. For the child care section, I split it into two parts. First, I will talk about general information about child care. They accommodate children from birth until their enrollment in formal school settings, the elementary school level. When parents enroll their child to this program, they have two choices: stay for a session, such as a half day, or have them stay for a full day. Regardless of what type they are enrolled in, educators in these settings provide a range for self-care routines and educational activities. I know I may be out of the loop in the educational level, but based on my understanding, self-care routines would include snacks and play, while educational activities are based on the lesson for the day, such as a story that was read in class. There are a number of reasons why children are placed in childcare. We can think of multiple reasons why, but what the Kemp et al. Reading gave me was that the most common one is work-related. Since parents are working, they need to consider which center would provide proper care to their child. The second reason that child cares help children obtain friendships because they want to meet others who may not live in the same neighborhood as them, and they want to get to know them in and out of the center. Now I am going to talk about child care and children with cognitive differences. When parents of children with cognitive differences enroll them in these settings, they believe that by placing them there, they are likely to receive care. However, they also need to be involved in their child's experience. First is identifying what accommodations their child needs. I have a cousin with autism, and before she went to childcare, the teachers asked my aunt and uncle how they would help her meet her communication needs. The second part during the enrollment is teachers providing inclusive learning opportunities, such as how they welcome new students and if they allow small group activities. Finally is supporting them, like discussing the good and tough events the child had, how parents can volunteer in the child care, and communicating with them daily. These next two areas that I will talk about can also be seen in the elementary, middle, and high school settings. Child engagement are appropriate interactions with the physical environment or with other peers. In any setting, we must think if a child feels welcomed and if we need to change what is present in the area. The reason why I said this is because engagement enhances one's learning and participation. Interactions are verbal and nonverbal communication attempts involving the child and another individual. Like what I said before, are we allowing all children to interact with one another? I have a short video that summarizes the slides I spoke about on helping students feel inclusive.
Every day is different, no 2 days are the same. I don't think I've ever done any job where I've felt more appreciated. If the child has a disability, it's about educating the other parents as to what that disability is, what that disability means, how it manifests itself. And the children within the setting teach each other and learn to accept, learn to be tolerant, learn to adjust. I don't tell them, they just do it naturally. And children are quite accepting. And as long as you explain things to them, if they ask a question and you give them an answer, they're happy. We also always have books, toys, equipment that will relate to a disability. So it's looking for the ability in every child, whether they've got a disability or not. And it's about making allowances for that child's needs, being innovative, thinking of different ideas and different ways of doing things, how to accommodate that child's needs. Whether you need to move furniture away, whether you need to change the toys. You just look at what that child can do to include that child in the setting. When it comes to accessing information, you've got to be quite resourceful. Go to the website on PACEY, there's lots of fact sheets, videos, there's a whole load of information if you're a member of PACEY that you can access on the website. I've found that personally, the children that I've had here at the setting have become more loving, kinder, friendlier, more tolerant of children with disabilities, more understanding, able to explain to other children what a disability is and what the child's ability is. And I've had parents tell me that they feel their children are more rounded, kinder, tolerant and accepting than they would have been if they'd been elsewhere. It's a very rewarding job. Working with children with disabilities, everybody gets something from it. All of the children learn from it. At the end of the day, we have a smile on our face.
Now we are going to dive deeper in fostering peer play and friendships in inclusive settings. When it comes to social relationships and acceptance, we must remember that most of the child's time they spend is at school, especially when they are in middle school and high school, where their identity is based on who their peer group is and who they associate themselves with. In regard to the second bullet point, many individuals socialize with each other about academic or non-academic topics during their free time, including lunch and recess. Upon meeting an individual, whether new to the classroom or new to the person, like you want to get to know him or her, it comes from how we form and maintain our relationships with them. Do we have a mutual friendship with the other person and want to get to know them? When answering this, consider the quality of the interaction, like how you initiated the start of the friendship. Finally, for those who have cognitive differences, help them learn that they are valued in their environment. Having them be involved in conversations show their initiation skills and their ability to be present. A way that individuals with cognitive differences learn about socialization is for them to interact with their classmates because they are exactly around the same age level. I spoke about inclusion and socialization, so now I will transition more on competent-based topics. So without further ado, I will now talk about classmates' attitudes. I want to start off with a quote I made and used for my policy presentation about increasing social inclusion programs in schools. Not everyone in school feels included. I am not trying to be controversial here, but if I offended you, I apologize. I chose this quote because there are instances where those with cognitive differences feel socially excluded by the school community than being socially inclusive. I can relate to this because the clients I work with through the CCIU feel the same way, and I also experience this. This leads to the second point of children with cognitive differences versus children without them. For both sides, what is their level of understanding about the term disabilities? No matter how old students are, they are learning about social acceptance. But it all comes down to these three components that the You et al. Article defined how attitudes are made. They are composed of three components: cognitive, affective, and behavioral. Cognitive is the knowledge about disabilities and beliefs on the causes, benefits, and consequences of the disability. Affective is the emotional reaction to peers with disabilities. How do we feel around them? Finally, behavioral is the attitudes formed upon how we view those with differences. How do they display those attitudes around them? Well, before I conclude with this slide, I want to point out one finding from the article. Social play with classmates with disabilities does not mean they prefer to play with those with disabilities. I pointed this out because there are times where many of us, myself included, hold on to the belief that those with cognitive impairments want to be with those of the same condition. We know that is not true because they want to meet others without these impairments. I want to wrap this slide with this question: how do we promote inclusion? Now I have a news report about how community members feel when seeing someone with an impairment. It is on an adult, but I felt that this still relates to what I've talked about.
Anyone living with a disability in the United Kingdom knows that from time to time you're going to get a pretty strange reaction or two from the general public. To gauge that, we have the help of state-of-the-art cameras here and on the end of guide dog Chip's harness. I'm just actually desperately lost. Can anybody help me, please? Really lost. Can anybody help? I don't know where I'm going and I'm really lost. Can anybody help me, please?
Being ignored is a common problem. It happened to this man's dad.
Quite often, once they realise he was disabled, they'd then talk to you rather than talk to him. So there'd be the sort of "does he take sugar" type of quote.
They just feel awkward. They don't know what to say. On the whole, people try their best to be understanding and kind, but they do rather speak to you as if you're stupid, not disabled.
But there are moments of decency too.
Do you want me to?
Is it this side of the road or the other?
On the other side of the road?
Could I just grab a hand across the road? Would you mind?
No, we need to walk a bit along.
Yeah, can I grab your arm?
Yep.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, no, it's fine.
Thank you. Are there any free seats where I can sit my dog, please? My guide dog.
This woman was quick to lend a hand when the bus started moving.
Sorry, can I possibly grab your arm, maybe? Sorry, thank you. Sorry.
Different disabilities bring different challenges and different situations too.
I was here once shopping in Oxford Street in one of the shops, and as the shop assistant was passing me my shopping, she bent down and kissed me on the cheek, and I'd forgotten all about that actually until I came here today. I just remembered that. That was very weird. That was very awkward for all concerned, because then she felt awkward, I felt awkward.
Hi, can anybody help me at all, please? Just after a bit of help, anybody help me? Here in central London, the report's conclusions that too many people would rather ignore you and walk on by have certainly been borne out. Hi, can anybody help me at all, please? I'm just after a hand.
The reality is that disability is a difficult subject for some people because it's just too easy to avoid it.
Hi, can anybody help me at all, please?
You may be wondering why I chose the basis of play. I selected this because play itself uses both muscle movement and socialization. Children with cognitive differences are likely to engage in both functional play and pretend play. There are 6 different types of play. I'm going to let the video explain the types of play, but before I start it, I want to let you know that the next slide will talk about what technique will be used when creating friendships. When we think about turn taking, the first thing that comes to mind is play, because it helps with patience and active engagement. What tends to be overlooked is that it also applies to social interactions because it increases peer response while decreasing solitary play. We see this apply when people engage in a conversation, such as when to speak, how to stay on topic, and how to transition to a different topic. There is a fact that individuals with cognitive differences interact more with adults than with their peers. I work with a high school client through the CCIU, and he has tendencies to call out during class. From his perspective, he does this to show his teachers that he knows the material. But we intervened by explaining how it is a turn-off to his classmates, as they know the expected norm to raise their hand before speaking, but he is not doing that. That was when we decided to do a behavioral chart that tracks how many times he calls out in class, and when he does, the teacher or I would have him explain why it is inappropriate. I chose this example because it relates to turn taking when we need to remember when to speak and what to speak about. To give you a visual example of turn taking in conversations, I will show you one last video.
It's time for Into the Spectrum's Fun Minute Tip.
Hi, Courtney Peters here. Whose turn is it? Your turn? My turn? Well, let's talk about turn taking. Well, when does this actually first come about? When do kids start to take turns? Well, let's think about those early years, about 1 year of age, when you're making those sounds like ooh or ba, ma, and then they'll repeat it, ma, ma, ma. Well, that's turn taking. And what about making those silly faces, like sticking your tongue out or raspberries, like and then they'll do it, and then I do it back. Well, there's turn taking. So that's why I think one of the very first ways where we first see turn taking. Well, now let's fast forward a little bit when we want to use it more in games. And you can see this when you're playing Connect 4 or Ring Stacker, or you're taking turns putting a puzzle together. Those are some common forms where you're turn taking. Well, how can we introduce this? I like to do it a lot of times when it's a little bit more structured. I have a piece and then I'll give you a piece. So I'll put mine in, my turn, and I'll also say my turn, and then I'll give the piece to the child and say your turn, and they can put in that one piece. I might have to guide them to put in the one piece the first time, but that's a good prompt. And then I would go again and say my turn, then give them the one piece, your turn, and then they would put that in. After they start to get that, I probably would give more pieces. So then they have to pick one themselves and put it in. So they have to, not touch all those other pieces and shove them all in, but take the one piece and put it in. Then I might move into not having to say my turn, your turn at all. Then we might know. So when I put mine in, the red one went in, then they know to put theirs in. So that's how you can do it. And let's also think about even further examples of maybe when you're in a classroom and everybody's raising their hand. Well, and you might have to take turns to get called on. So you can see that this actually plays a part, and taking turns is a lifelong skill. All right, have fun playing turn taking. Bye.
Thanks for watching Into the Spectrum's Fun Minute Tip. Don't forget to like.
This is where our role comes in helping children with cognitive differences feel inclusive. Check in on them, such as seeing how they feel when they are at school, when they are completing assignments or activities by themselves or with a group, and if an individual is feeling stuck, which is a child having a difficult time at some point on their day. Introduce a new social skill and teach them how to apply it. This goes in the event when someone is having a difficult time interacting with his peers or teachers. In the event where a social skill is identified as an IEP goal, have them enroll in social skill classes in their school or even in the community. When presenting social skills, you may use visuals such as the media and even role play to see how these skills are used. At my MSW placement with Spectra Support Services, I facilitated a social skills group at Haverford College where we had lessons based on communication and peer interactions. Provide and explain homework to them on the skill they learn. they learned. It doesn't have to be a pencil to paper assignment, but can be on practicing it with others. For example, as I mentioned before, I had a learning disability which affects how I socialize with others. When I was in 5th grade, my special education teacher gave me an assignment to engage in a conversation with several students and my teacher because I did not speak much in class. Along with the homework, provide a reinforcement when practicing this new skill, like what the child will work for. Going back to the conversation example I shared, my teacher asked me what I wanted to work for as my reward. If you were wondering, it was a Three Musketeers bar. Using reinforcements such as tangibles and verbal praise will help individuals feel motivated when having meaningful interactions with their peers. Finally, monitor them when engaging in conversations. As children begin feeling inclusive, observe how they interact with others. When doing this, we must ask ourselves if they need no further assistance or if we need to teach that skill again. Socializing and peer play, go hand in hand together when it comes to inclusion in the school setting. From definitions relating to socializing to helping individuals with their social skills, our individuals with cognitive differences will be able to form meaningful social interactions not only with those in their school, but in their home and school community settings. For the critical thinking activity, I want you to reflect on the school environment you are in right now, whether it is a childcare, elementary, middle, or high school setting. If you are not in a school setting, you can use your current or previous experiences with children and even adults with cognitive differences. Choose a concept about socializing, such as turn taking, social skills evaluation, and so on, and explain how you can implement them to your individuals. Consider how you will measure the effectiveness of your intervention, what you would like to highlight, and most importantly, how you will explain to your individual why you are implementing this. I know this was a lot of information to cover about fostering peer play and friendships in order to create a culture for inclusion. Like I said, I covered areas in the social work perspective and tied them in with the education system and my experiences with those with cognitive differences. I hope this information helped you learn how to promote inclusion and socialization not only for those with autism, but for everyone with cognitive impairments. The references listed are mostly journals from the library, and I also added videos in case you may want to review them again or if you want to show them to your colleagues. The topic of socializing can be broad to discuss, especially when creating plans that can benefit our individuals with these differences. However, by addressing this, we are able to help them be able to create and maintain meaningful interactions with others in their school, whether they are classmates, teachers, staff, or even administrators. What I like about talking about this subject is how flexible we can promote socializing. Like I said earlier, I am not a teacher and somewhat brand new to the education system. After all, I am going for my master's in social work and a certification for autism spectrum disorder at Westchester. But what I do know is that from collaboration between regular education teachers, special education teachers, and even service providers, we can help those with cognitive differences feel valued and accepted in their school. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation. I hope you all have a very good day. And please, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email me back. Once again, thank you so much.